Hi, it's Jan Beta, and we're still in the festive months of DOS-Sember, which really is a collaboration between several YouTube channels focused on retro computers and retro technology in general. And the participants in this collaboration decided to focus a bit on DOS systems or IBM compatible systems and everything that goes with it for the month of December. So this is part of that. And I thought, as this channel usually is focused on Commodore stuff, I'm going to focus on the Commodore PC-10-2 that I have here, which is one of the earlier Commodore PC models. Yeah, you heard right, Commodore made PCs back in the 80s. They were developed in Braunschweig, Brunswick in Germany, and the engineers there thought it would be a good idea to have a PC lineup for Commodore because the other machines Commodore was selling at the time, or trying to sell at the time, weren't doing particularly well, except for maybe the Commodore 64. They had the Commodore 16 and the Commodore Plus 4 and things like that, which were more or less a failure from an economic point of view, because basically they made so many bad decisions that they weren't selling that stuff. So the German branch of Commodore decided, quite in secret really, because they didn't inform the US headquarters of that, but they were free to develop their own products at that time. And they developed a line of PCs because they thought the PC market would be a good market for Commodore to set a foot into, because they were previously making business machines, hence the name Commodore Business Machines. The PAT and things like that were quite an industry standard really for business computers. And the new standard obviously became the IBM compatibles. IBM had a huge market share of that, and the machines were pretty pricey compared to other machines of the time. Commodore decided to make a more affordable clone of the IBM PCs. The PC-10 was, I think, the second incarnation. It's the whole line. There's the PC-10, the PC-20, and later they had more models. But the PC-10 was the first one they did, as far as my research goes. Correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, the first incarnation of this PC-10 actually had a split mainboard because they didn't have the computing power. Some people say they used their own PAT machines to design the circuit board, and that didn't have enough memory to have one huge board, so they put it on two separate boards. Really, there's a divider, and it's connected with wires basically in the first model of this. This is the second one, PC-10-2, so that has a single larger mainboard, which of course is a bit more convenient to work on and more stable and easier to produce in the end. So yeah, this originally came with two floppy disk drives. This only has one because the previous owner, who also donated this, and I want to thank you, Arthur, he took that out for some other system at some point. This had a hard disk in it, it's no longer in there. But we have a disk drive, and Arthur also found the manuals and the keyboard for it. So yeah, the plan for today is to inspect this system and do some preventative maintenance work on it and see if we can make this boot up basically. And yeah, I'm going to take you along on this journey. As I've said numerous times now, I'm not particularly a fan of PCs, nor am I an expert, so please excuse any noob or rookie mistakes I make with this. This is basically the first XT system, apart from the Amiga Bridgeboard, that I am looking at from an electronics point of view, and yeah, my experience with DOS is very limited. Yeah, without further ado, let's open this up and have a look inside and see what this machine is all about and if we can actually make it work. So the screws are actually already removed, it seems. The case screws. There's only one case screw in here, one in the middle. Usually it has 5 screws in the back here. Only one still in there. So now this should just basically... This is the case. Of course, it's very similar to the Amiga 2000 because that was built by the same people. So this is a metal case. It should lift off in some weird way. I don't quite know how. Okay, whoa. Okay,
There's loose cards everywhere. Okay, here we are inside. There's no hard disk in here. The PC speakers just, it should be stuck here, I guess. Somehow. Yeah, like this. And there's a card. I think this supposedly is a memory expansion. These are UM62256A chips. Yeah, these are memory. These are RAMs. Jumper configuration with some leads there. This should be the main memory card. Power for the hard drive. This is an ATI something, probably graphics card. But that's probably a CGA card, I would guess. What's this? It's a CGA card, I think, as well. So this has the chips logo on it. And it says something like SPEGA. It's an EGA card, maybe even. Has these unlabeled connectors, of course. Some dip switches. And this seems to be a CGA connector. As you can probably tell, I'm a total noob with PC stuff. Because I didn't have a PC back then. I had Amigas and C64s. The bright side of the Commodore world, basically. It looks in quite nice condition, actually. Maybe I want to try to power it on, just try to power it on and see if it explodes. The power supply ought to be really old. Maybe we should have a look inside the power supply first. Yeah, let's do that. As I pointed out earlier, it's the festive season of DOS-Sember. And my sponsor for this video, PCBWay, has some festivities set up on their website. They have design contests, they have giveaways with all kinds of Christmassy goodies, and they also have a lot of discounts currently, so check out the link in the description. So I'm just removing the power supply from the case. It's just screwed in here with 4 huge screws. I think. Yeah, it's already coming off. There's probably a really loud fan in there. This is like, yeah, it's ancient technology. So I'm going to mark the orientation of the plug here with a Sharpie. Just to make sure that goes in the correct way. Okay. So this here supposedly is a disk drive connector. 34 pin. Yeah, probably connects to this disk drive here. I think I might even have a cable for that somewhere. Oh, and this plug is actually is shaped so that you can't plug it in the wrong way. It's a bit dusty, but otherwise it's not in bad condition at all. Let's take a look at the power supply and see if there's any bulging caps or anything like that. So yeah, let's have a look. Smaller screwdriver for this. And fans riveted in just on the, like on the Amiga 2000. But this is a whole different story. Kind of a strange construction. Some things lose. Okay, that's good. Oh, there we go. These two. So you got to remove all the small screws, I guess. These two. There we go. Okay. Wow, that's some old school power supply going on there. Wow. November 1985. This is a switching power supply. German made, German components actually. This is a Dutch component. It's a Philips big capacitor and it's actually dented a bit, so I kind of doubt that this is still in good condition. Some kind of these are RIFAs. So in this particular power supply, as you see in many power supplies, especially for digital devices that are susceptible to noise, and especially in switching power supplies as well, which this is, you find these class Y and class X capacitors. These are basically filtering high frequencies right after the power gets into the device, so before the whole power supply circuit. And these RIFA variants of these
are particularly, I think you can see some fine cracks forming here. These, actually what happens is these gather moisture from the environment basically, and yeah, they have a tendency to short out, and if they do, they burst into a big puff of smoke basically that smells particularly bad. I'm never going to forget my first RIFA capacitor blowing up. And yeah, the X variant, I think this is an X variant, is between the live and the neutral, while the Y variant is between the live and protective earth usually. Supposedly that is what happens in this circuit. We're going to have to look at that in a second. And yeah, what they do is filter out high frequencies, I think mostly between 150 kilohertz and 100 megahertz or thereabouts from the mains, which there is sometimes noise on the mains. It's not particularly a problem this day and age, but there are signals transmitted through the mains power lines at times and things like that. So it's always good to have these in here. You can usually just take them out and the device is going to work regardless, but I am going to replace these. They are also used to filter the noise coming from the switching power supply from getting to the mains net. So yeah, they basically work both ways. These are self-healing. The Y capacitor usually is there in case the protective earth connection fails, and the X is a filter. Both have filter capabilities and both work as a filter, usually in conjunction with inductors, which you can also see here. And there's two windings going across the same ferrite core, so that's another stage of the filtering basically. And yeah, I'm going to replace these, and I'm going to replace the values of electrolytic capacitors in here that I have at hand. I don't think I have all of them, but I'm going to eventually order them and replace all of them because they are from 1985, so they are pretty old. Electrolytic capacitors have a tendency to dry out and lose their filtering capabilities, so that's always a good thing to do, especially on these power supplies. For these older switching power supplies, actually you don't want to go to modern caps. There are caps nowadays for modern switching power supplies that are aimed at very high switching frequencies. Usually these older ones have lower switching frequencies, so you might run into problems if you use ultra low ESR. There are different labels for those ultra low, super modern, expensive capacitors. I'm going to go with my usual general purpose caps because these are not particularly low ESR compared to modern capacitors. I'm going to go with my modern day general purpose capacitors. I think I have some of the values. They are going to be fine, hopefully. So yeah, let me get this out of the metal can and start working on it. Heatsink is actually screwed through, so we have to remove those. We have a grounding screw here that we have to remove, and then the circuit board itself is screwed to the case as well. It's kind of a similar thing that I did on my C64 power supply build with the ground screw. Crimped on connector and then a washer and a nut. It's a star washer. I'm going to put these in my C64 power supply as well. I didn't have one at hand when I built it, but this is a good thing because it grips into the metal and makes better contact with the metal case. And also supposedly it's more shake proof, but that is debatable, I think. Oh, and this has an insulating layer on the bottom, glued in. Very nice. So, judging by my quick observations on the PCB, these RIFA caps are used on actually the low voltage portion of the power supply. This is where the mains voltages go in, and this is nicely separated, by the way, the low voltage that supplies the actual machine. So these are used on the output of that, it seems. which is also an option. Usually in power supply designs you see them closer to the mains input. Yeah, so I just realized this seems to have the input filtering in this black block that's literally on the input on the mains power jack, where there is like a little schematic printed on it and there is capacitors in there. So this might as well just give us trouble, but I'm not going to replace that yet. You can buy these as a block like this with the mains socket on there as well. It says X2 and Y. There are mains filter capacitors, just like I pointed out on here on the input in this block, and there are these RIFA ones for the output. And I would guess that this also has some overvoltage protection and all kinds of fancy stuff implemented. There are some diodes. Usually you use a Zener diode for overvoltage protection. I'm just going to replace the capacitors for which I have the correct values now. Another thing to point out with these older electrolytic capacitors, you can see here that some of them, not all of them on this board even, have the positive side marked with a plus, and they have it marked on the flat side rather than on the round side. Some of them have both polarities marked, plus and minus, and these, for example, have the negative marked, as is more usual these days. But for these old ones, sometimes we have them marked on the top like this, where the positive side is the one that's more distinctly marked. Yeah, just so we don't run into issues there, because if you get them in the wrong polarity, they blow up rather quickly, usually. So I'm going to be extra careful with that and just replace one at a time, as I do usually. I took pictures of all the capacitors, which is something that is a good habit I found to figure out the polarity, because there's nothing marked on the board. Literally, it's a single-sided board and there are no polarity markers I can see. So yeah, let's see how this goes. So, and upon further inspection of the board, I just realized that it actually has another stage of filtering right behind the mains. This is right after the mains plug. We have what I was talking about. We have an X2 and I think a Y. No, it's two X2, I think. These are the filter capacitors, the mains filter capacitors, and the inductor with two 18 microhenry windings. Actually, this is the mains filtering I was talking about. So they have double filtering on the input side, the mains side, and they also have the little RIFAs on the output side. Wow. Okay, so they were taking that stuff really seriously with the noise from the mains and noise going to the board, actually. Excellent. These are a more modern variety of the capacitors though, so these should be some sort of maybe polyester film, I'm not quite sure. But usually these don't give you any issues, so I'm just going to leave these in and hope that there's a similar kind of type in this box here. We are going to replace these. You also want to short out the high voltage capacitors in these power supplies. This one is the only one. This hasn't been turned on in years, probably decades, so not too worried about this holding a charge still. But it's still a good idea to do that, because these can shock you quite nastily. Yeah, let's just go about our business here. As I said, I'm going one at a time and taking things slowly. So, got everything recapped that I had. Unfortunately, I don't have the large filter capacitor, which is a 220 microfarad, 380 volts rated one. I ordered a 220 microfarad, 400 volts rated one, which is going to be fine. These RIFAs turned out to both be Y versions, so they're probably both going to Earth. And there's one 1.5 microfarad one that I didn't have in stock, and it's probably going to not be easy to find an electrolytic capacitor of that capacity anymore. Probably going to replace that with a film capacitor of some description at some point. But for now, I think we are going to be fine. So I'm going to put this back together and see if it actually works. The fan is one of those, it's all metal and it's a high voltage, like a mains voltage fan, like it was usual in these old power supplies. Really beefy fan. I'm not going to replace that. I think it probably still works. I'm going to put a drop of oil in here, I think. And I'm going to clean up the dust a little bit. That's probably all I want to do to the fan. Put a little bit of silicone oil in there, I think. If that goes in there at all. Maybe. And I've rechecked the polarity of all the capacitors I can see. Yeah, I'm going to put this in the original metal casing again, because in case something blows up, we're not exposed to the components blowing up right away. Okay, now for testing this, I'm going to hook it up to the mains and turn it on, which you technically, it might hurt the power supply in the long term if you don't have a load on there. It might not turn on, I'm not sure. Some switching power supplies don't even turn on. Yeah, we're just going to find out, and I'm going to try to measure some voltages here. Didn't blow up so far, let's turn it on. Okay, the fan is pretty loud, but it has quite some throughput there. And maybe you can see from this angle that half of it is actually painted in the beige color of the PC. Half of it isn't, so they painted only the part that's actually visible. Kind of a nice feature. So, okay, let's test some voltages. 12 volts and 5 volts is what we're after, so yeah. The blue ones are ground, it seems. And we get our 5 volts and our 12 volts. Yeah, I'm going to test the mainboard connector. That's our 5. That's our 12. That's minus 12, isn't it? Yeah, that's minus 12 and plus 12. This is another ground. And this is another 5. So we should be good on the power supply, which is great, of course. Guess we could try to put it in the PC and see if it actually works. I don't want to do too much to the PC itself at this point. There are capacitors that I can replace, of course, but I was more worried about this blowing up in my face. So for testing this, we should be good. And the voltages seem to be spot on, pretty much. So yeah. Let's try that. Yeah, we're going to have to do some more work on the main board. This is a RAM expansion, I think, that I'm going to take out for this quick initial test. Yeah, I think I want to leave most of the other stuff unchanged for now. Well, there's a thick layer of dust on this. I hope this works. And this is the original graphics card, which should be a CGA graphics card that I'm just going to leave in there for now, unchanged. This is actually how it goes, isn't it? This case has a larger footprint than the Amiga 2000, but it's a bit lower, actually. And by the way, if you watched my Amiga 2000 Bridgeboard video, this is originally pretty much the same specs, so it's a very basic XT machine. This one has a better processor in it, an NEC V20, which is a bit of a faster processor, but this still, in this configuration that I'm running it now, should be pretty much stock and no more bells and whistles. So this should go in here. Do I want to hook up the drive yet? Yeah, I'm going to find a cable for that. I need a bigger workbench sometime. This should be it. And this should be pin 1. It's this side here. So this should probably be, if it works, a working PC-10. Let's find out and see if we get a beep, an initializing beep. Don't have a monitor hooked up to this, obviously. Not yet. That's going to be the next step, I think. So yeah, let's power this on, I guess. Fingers crossed. Okay, we have a light. Don't get any initialization from the disk drive, which is not a good sign. And we don't get a beep, but at least we have a power LED lighting up. Maybe we have some more troubleshooting to do. Jumper settings. Maybe I have to install the RAM expansion. Let's have a look at the manual. And thankfully we also have the slightly dirty keyboard that has the word perfect key map still on it. I'm just going to plug this in too, because I don't know if this is going to post without a keyboard connected. I have no idea. Okay, another try. Let's see if this posts now, or if we at least get a chime. Don't get anything at all still. Oh, the caps lock key works. So we're getting power to the keyboard as well. Yeah. Numlock, caps lock. And it beeped! That took some time. It was checking the memory all the time, I guess. Wow, okay. It just took that long. Should hook up a monitor to this so we can actually see things happening, if they happen. Let's try that again, shall we? And this time I'm going to catch it on camera, maybe. Okay, so this takes some time. It's probably checking the RAM and determining whether the RAM is good. And then the drive spins up for its initial spin up, maybe, if it works this time. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Ah, the drive sounds dirty. But hey, this is posting. One beep, I think, probably means something is wrong. Maybe it means everything is alright. I have no idea because I can't see anything on screen. Yeah, let me work out a way to connect this to the screen actually. So, well, after spending most of last night working on this and trying different jumper settings, I managed to get it to boot, and the drive is initialized. We have the memory expansion in, and I set the jumpers to 640K of RAM, which initializes fine. We get a beep and we get a spin up, and it tries to boot from the disk drive. However, I haven't managed to get a proper graphics output from this. I am using the original AGA card, which is, it has nothing to do with the Amiga AGA graphics chipset. It just means Advanced Graphics Adapter, as stated on the manual. And yeah, there's a couple of jumper settings for color video and for different monitor types. I fitted with that, and whenever I get a CGA output, which I have, turn this off, I used my little CGA to RGB VGA adapter that I have shown in one of my Commodore 128 videos. This is aimed at the Commodore 128, but it should technically work as a CGA to VGA adapter as well, which it does. So the thing is, I either get a sync signal on my OSSC that is converted to HDMI and displayed on the screen, and I even get a blinking cursor, but I don't get a boot up when I put it in the RGB monitor mode and put the mainboard in the color output mode, which should technically output a CGA signal. We don't get a boot up, but we get a blinking cursor. Whenever I set this to another display mode, we get a boot up, but we don't get a picture out. So what I'm going to do is to try to make this work through the composite output that this should also produce, according to the manual. I have to make a little cable that gives me a RCA composite output from the 9-pin D-sub connector that this has, the CGA standard connector. And fortunately the pin outs and everything is in the manual, so that's not going to be much of a problem. Other than that, I'm pretty much out of ideas. I'm going to show you what this does so you know what works and what doesn't. So this should now post, but we don't get a picture because it doesn't sync, it just jumps. The frequencies just jump around wildly because it's set to the wrong monitor type. But this should post, and we have a little LED on the RAM expansion that lights up when that is initialized, so I think the whole system is initialized and it tries to boot. It reacts to key presses even, and we get the little boot up beep. So I think everything is okay and initialized okay, except for the graphics. There we go, there's a little LED lighting up, you probably can't see it. And we get a spin up, but we don't have a picture out. That's my problem at the moment. So here's the setting with the jumpers set to color, 80 columns, 25 lines, and this set to RGB out and color mode. So now we get a sync signal and we get a blinking cursor as it's supposed to be, but the system doesn't start up properly. So here's the little rows of jumpers, and 5 and 6 are to set the screen mode that is initialized. And here's the jumpers on the graphics card that I've tried all kinds of combinations, and I either get a boot up or I get a picture. So yeah, what I'm going to try to do is to get a composite out of this and make a cable for that and see if that gives me a boot up with a picture actually. I think whenever I set this to color mode it doesn't work. Maybe something's wrong with the mainboard. Maybe we just have a problem with the graphics card, which I suspect this to be for some reason. But yeah, that's what it is. As I said, I tried to figure it out, but yeah, it doesn't quite work as expected. Okay, I found myself some ingredients to make a composite cable. DB9 connector, RCA connector, a little coaxial cable. This is an audio cable, but it doesn't really matter for this purpose. Housing. Strip the cable, connect pin 7, I think is the video pin, and pin 2 is the ground pin. And this is going to be the shielding of the cable is connected to ground, which is the outer shielding here, and the inner pin is the video pin, signal pin. So let's do that. So that's going to be a little adapter because I have so many of these and very few actual RCA cables left that are not in use. So you could of course solder on a male connector there. So here's the pinout for the color mode and the monochrome mode. So it seems to be slightly different for both modes, but the video pin is always pin 7. I think for the composite video to work, we have to put it into color mode actually. So composite video, pin 7, ground we're going to take from pin 2 or pin 1. I think pin 2 is the standard pin. That's the same pinout like on the Commodore 128 actually. So we're going to use that, 7 and 2. So this is going to double as a Commodore 128 cable for me. Okay, long story short, I fiddled with the original graphics adapter that was in there, which is the original one that was supplied with the computer, for quite a bit. And I tried my self-made composite adapter and I didn't get anything. I got some contact cleaner in here in the chips and tried stuff. And yeah, I think this card is broken. So I put an EGA card in there that Arthur also delivered with this because he was actually suspecting that this had some issues. So I put that in there, looked up the jumper settings, which are the exact same ones as on the original IBM EGA cards, and I set this to the CGA output mode, connected the adapter you've seen me use before again, and connected my OSSC upscaler, and now we're actually getting somewhere. Look at that. That's actually the changed BIOS for the V20 processor. And we get an actual output. It's checking the memory, which of course takes a while because it's a lot of memory for a machine that slow and old. And yeah, it should go into boot up. In a second. Any moment now. Takes some time. It's a bit slow, admittedly. Yeah, now it actually asks for a boot disk. So let's try and put a boot disk in there, I guess. So and this is a German localized BIOS, it seems. See if it can actually boot a disk. The drive sounds horrible. I actually have to clean that probably. But it seems to be reading something. Yay! MS-DOS 3.3. We got it to boot! Wow, that took some time and effort. Especially because I'm a complete noob when it comes to PC stuff, especially this old PC stuff. My first PC was a Pentium 1, so yeah. Let's see. Yes! It actually works. That's pretty cool. Well, the keyboard doesn't feel that bad. It's the original keyboard. Yeah, I like the keyboard. I like PC keyboards, okay. Yes! Okay, we got it to boot. And it's working. It was just the graphics card that didn't work. So I, yeah, could have done all the jumper settings I wanted probably. But yeah, it was just the graphics card being wonky there. That's a success! Nice! Let's see if we can actually
get it to display color as well. We should just be able to set the dip switches on the mainboard to the color mode now, and it should boot up in color, probably, maybe, hopefully. Let's see. Okay, booting in color mode. Let's see what it does. We still get a video output. Oh, and we didn't even get the beep, so this is probably the more correct way. Okay. Let's put the boot disk back in. And wait for the memory check. There we go. By the way, this is of course my MS-DOS boot disk from the breadboard. We don't have color, it seems. Don't know why, but that's none of my concerns. Maybe just the adapter doesn't work correctly with the graphics card. Should be in color mode now, technically. Wow, it works! It totally works! That's nice. Of course, this needs a lot more work at some point, but I think I'm going to leave it at that for this video. I'm going to do a whole restoration of this at some point and figure out some more. Probably try to get the hard disk that came with it to work. Yeah, if you have any other ideas what to do with a system like this, let me know in the comments. Yeah, so far I'm pretty pleased that I got it to work at all. And yeah, as I said, there's going to be more work. This is going to be it for this video, I think. Yeah, that was my foray into the world of Commodore PCs for DOS-Sember. I'm pretty happy that I got it working again. And obviously there's a lot of things that I can do to this. I'm going to do a full restoration of this, optical case restoration and electronical full restoration. This was merely to get this working and to see if it still worked at all. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more. If you are into celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. And as this is going to be the last video for this year on this channel, Happy New Year, and hopefully see you on the other side. Hopefully 2021 will be a tiny bit better than 2020, I hope so. Stay safe, please don't do anything stupid on Christmas. We're still in the middle of a pandemic and it's crucially important that you don't infect each other. A very, very special thank you to everybody who supported me throughout this year on Patreon and with donations and with YouTube channel memberships. Without your support, I wouldn't be able to exist. This channel wouldn't be able to exist. So yeah, thank you very, very much. And I feel very privileged to be able to do this. Yeah, just a huge thank you. Take care. See you on the other side. I'm Jan Peter. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.